Hi guys, so today I'll be presenting Chapter 10, A Synthetic Perspective on Instrumental Action. And in this lecture, I specifically focused on Section 1, which was titled Avoidance Learning. And so the puzzle and the solution is a two-factor theory, and it's difficult to determine the event that reinforces behavior in avoidance learning. To do this, researchers have used a shuttle box to study avoidance learning. And in this experiment, a rat was trained to avoid an electric shock by running across the box. So a two-factor theory is any avoidance situation, there's usually cues or warning signals in the environment that tell the organism that an adverse event is about to happen. There are two types of trials that occur in avoidance learning experiments. And an important one is when the warning signal comes on and is paired with a shock. And that tests Pavlovian fear conditioning of warning stimuli, and it also tests reinforcement of the instrumental response through fear reduction. I thought it was important to note that there is an important application to clinical psychology, and this applies because people learn behaviors that allow them to escape or reduce negative emotion. This is commonly seen in drug abuse and anxiety disorders. So there are some problems with the two-factor theory. It makes two main predictions. The first is that if fear motivates avoidance behavior, the strength of the avoidance response should correlate with the amount of fear that the subject shows in the situation. And the second prediction is that terminating the warning signal and thereby escaping fear should play a major role in allowing avoidance learning. And since this theory was developed, there has been controversy about the role of warning signal termination and the crucial event that is supposed to provide reinforcement through fear reduction. So the textbook discussed free operant avoidance, which eliminates the warning signal, and research began to show the importance of warning signal termination was not universal. They began investigating the role of manipulating the contingencies in the avoidance experiment. So there are species-specific defense reactions. The book did shorten this to SSDR, but I just kept it in the long form for this lecture. And this suggested that animals have evolved in ways where they have innate behaviors to protect them from being preyed upon by other animals. And the behaviors are specific to each specific species. So some behaviors may be innate, and you have behaviors elicited by tissue damage to function to promote healing. So if any of you have ever had maybe a dog that got a wound on its paw, you'll notice the dog licks the paw a lot, and this is one of these behaviors. And so both danger signals and the sight, smell, or sound of an actual predator arouse the motivational state of fear, and that in turn potentiates species-specific defense mechanisms. Sorry, that's a little hard for me to say, apparently. And so in this section, the textbook, the author looked at cognitive factors in avoidance learning. And there's an emphasis on natural defensive behaviors rather than new behaviors learned through reinforcement. Additionally, it's important to note that humans also perform these species-specific defense mechanisms. They reduce their natural body movements and decrease their heart rate in a manner that's consistent with freezing. So if you've ever walked across campus and you see a rabbit and it freezes, it stops and it stares at you, humans do have a similar response to that. So there's an explicit biological emphasis in species-specific defense mechanisms of avoidance learning. And the approach is also cognitive in the sense that it emphasizes that organisms learn about danger and safety cues. So modern avoidance theory envisions an organism not only performing natural defensive behaviors, but also learning about cues in its environment through the Pavlovian process. And another topic was learned helplessness, and its avoidance learning proceeded very slowly if a dog was subjected to first given inescapable shocks before the avoidance training. And so exposure to inescapable shock had several effects. It had the immunization effect, in which organisms do more than merely learn to respond to instrumental learning experiments. They may acquire knowledge about the relationship between their behaviors and outcomes. It also had the learned helplessness effect, in which finding the inescapable shock interferes with subsequent escape learning, and it's often called the learned helplessness effect. And learned irrelevance is when there's zero contingency between a conditioned stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus. So it's harder to learn to associate the two events when they are later paired. So that covers most of section one, avoidance learning. There are two more sections I would recommend you take a look at, and good luck when you take your quiz on this information.